Hi everyone, thanks for joining me in the shop today. Today we're going to make some lumber. So this will be a short video on how to make something usable out of the board I'm going to show here next. So this is the board. As you can see, it's fairly wide and it's got some issues with it. First thing I want to point out is right here there's a knot. I'm looking for checking, I'm looking for pitch pockets, I'm looking for knots to try and remove them. In this case, I may leave that knot in there. Also want to take note of how the board was sawn. In this case, it's mostly flat sawn, as you can see from these arcs here, but there's a little bit of quarter saw here on either side of this log. Notice that it still has a live edge on it, so I'm going to take you through how to get straight boards out of a piece of lumber like this and hopefully have successful results. First step is know your equipment. So in my case, I have a 6-inch joiner, which means I can only flatten boards that are 6 inches wide or narrower. I also have a 6-inch bandsaw, so that corresponds to I can only resaw and cut boards that are 6 inches or less in width. Next, it's helpful to have a cut list. In this case, I've got some nominal lengths here that I'm looking for. I try to get about 6 inches longer than I think I actually need in order to make the board. That way I've got some room to maneuver when there's in checking or other issues with the board. So lastly, you can see I've already marked, how long I think I'm going to get out of this board. I'm going to get 2 times out of it. I've got some lines on here to rip and make roughly a 12-inch board out of this that I'll cut in half and make 2 6-inch boards. And then over here I'm going to try and get some shorter boards out of it, and I'm going to cut out this middle piece so that I don't have any problems with the finished lumber. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this board in half based on the line that I have marked to get some smaller, more workable sizes. It's always easier to run them through the joiner and the bandsaw when they're more along the lines of the dimension size that you're going to work with. Plus, in this case, since I've got disjointed boards, it's not going to be one straight cut all the way through. In some cases, I might rip a longer board out and cut it shorter later, but not in this case. Now that I've got the board cut in half, you can see there's a bit of, I don't know if that's termite or worm activity or what. I've been running into a few boards like this. This is all air dried lumber, so usually when it's kiln drying, it's up to the point where it's will actually kill the bugs that are in there. So I don't know if it's this prevalent throughout the whole stack of lumber. I certainly hadn't seen it up until recently, where there was actually even a live grub in one of them. But anyway, we'll see how bad it is, whether it causes me to have to abort that board or not. I'm going to try and salvage it and work around it. But once it's cut in half, now I'm going to start cutting a board out following these 2 parallel lines here to get one roughly straight board out of here with the jigsaw. Okay, so now I've got the board cut out. It turns out it's a little shy of 9 or 10 inches, so cut in half it's going to be about 4 3/8 or something. So I'll probably do that on the bandsaw now that I've got roughly a straight edge, and before I go to the joiner with anything. Okay, so I'm going to cut the board out of this board here at 5.5 inches. So first I'm going to cut off this side to get a more of a straight edge, and I'm going to cut this checking off here. pile of boards now that have been ripped down to 6 inches in width or less. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my board and I want to look at the edge, and I want to find the straightest edge, and that'll be the first edge that I joint. After I joint the edge, I'm going to look at the board and find the best side, and I'll joint that side. And what that will allow me to do is I will eventually rip off a bunch of the excess so that I don't have to send it through the planer a whole bunch more times. But interesting, you can see this board as you're looking down it. It's got a little crown or dip in it. So when running through the joiner, I'm going to want to have this side here face down because of the way the knives work. Otherwise, if it's on the other side, you'll end up trying to cut a U shape, so it'll be unstable and it will ride on the bed here. Let's see if I can get right on the bed and flip up and not ever get flat. So that's the side on this board I want to join. Most of these other boards are quite a bit flatter than that, so you can look down, like, you know, that's pretty good. Most of them, like I said, are pretty well flat for the most part. So, okay, to the joiner next. Okay, so I've marked the edge of the board that I want to join, and I've noted the curvature of the board. So I want to join this face, and let's see how it goes. After putting a bunch of effort into some of these boards, unfortunately, one like this one is not going to make it. It just has too many bug trails in it, and it's probably structurally okay as long as the bugs aren't active, but I don't really want that look. I'm going to show you another one that I'm going to keep here, I think, at least right now. You know, there's a couple bug holes here, there's a couple here, but otherwise, the board generally looks to be intact. All right, now that I've got my pile of boards milled here, at least first pass on the joiner, I'm going to cut off the excess on the bandsaw. So rip or resaw as it's called on the bandsaw, and I draw this line on here because it gives me an indication to make sure that the blade, you know, is tracking properly. If you see, you know, how much flexibility there is in here, although this is fairly tight, there's deflection that happens and it causes that cut to wander, and then you end up having less width than you actually want. So next step is we'll resaw some wood to make thinner, and then finally we'll run them through the planer to make finished boards. a board ready for planing. I'm going to run these through the planer. See that eventually these boards will flatten up and we'll get them to the right dimension that we want. And finally, the last step will be we'll cut this rough edge off so that we have everything square. And that's how you get a flat board out of a piece of raw lumber.